So today we're going to be ordering fractions and decimals, positive and negative. So if you remember with negative numbers, the bigger the number looks, the smaller it actually is. So we're going to, so fractions and decimals can also be negative, and luckily it works the same way. So the bigger the decimal or fraction looks, the smaller it really is. To order negative fractions, make sure they have a common denominator, change the numerators, and then compare. Make sure this time, though, the bigger the numerator is, the smaller the fraction actually is. So another thing I'm going to have you add is that your symbols here. So we have greater than or less than. So this would be greater than, this would be less than. So make sure you write those. And I remember this is because this is like opening up to the bigger number. Okay, so this is the greater than symbol, this is the less than symbol. So we have two fractions, 2 3/4, 2 5/8. I'm just going to write them a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. We need to have a common denominator. So they both have denominators of 4 and 8. 4 can go into 8. So I'm going to use that as a common denominator. So I'm going to multiply this denominator by 2 to get 8. Therefore, I multiply the top by 2, which is 6. So now I have negative 2 and 6/8 and negative 2 and 5/8. We want to know, oh, I wrote that wrong, negative 2 and 5/8. We want to know which one is bigger. So because they are both negative, the one that actually looks smaller is actually bigger. So we're comparing our numerators. Since 5 looks smaller, it's actually bigger. So this would be the bigger fraction, so it would open up towards the bigger number. So you would say negative 2 and 6/8 is less than negative 2 and 5/8. Okay? Decimals, what I do is I add zeros so that they match up, and I compare like normal. Only the bigger it looks, the smaller it is. So negative 1.234 and then negative 1.2. What I do is I add zeros so they have the same amount of digits. And then I pretend the decimal's not even there. So I pretend that this is negative 1,234 and negative 1,200. The one that looks smaller is actually bigger. So this would be the bigger fraction. So this, again, this number is smaller than this number. So you add zeros, and then what I do is I pretend the decimal's not even there. So I just pretend it's like a number in the thousands. The smaller it looks, the bigger it is because they're negative. Okay, so let's try some examples. You guys can flip over your notes and do these. Graph each number and its opposite. So from other lessons, you know, 0 is the number that separates the positives from the negatives, so that's always in the middle. 3/4 is a positive number, so it's going to go to the right of 0. The opposite of positive 3/4 is negative 3/4. So just put it on the opposite side of the 0. That's it. Same with decimals. I'm going to draw my number line. 0 separates the positives from the negatives. Negative 1.6 would be on the left side of 0 because that's where the negatives are. The opposite is positive 1.6, which would be on the right. Okay, so you're going to pause and try these two. Same thing, just draw a number line, put a 0 in the middle, figure out where these numbers go, and then do their opposites. Okay, I'm going to have you try these as well. So basically, again, you're just going to draw your number line, put a 0 in the middle, figure out where 2.5 would go, which side of 0, and then put the opposite on the other side. So try these two as well. Okay, now we're going to do some comparing again. You guys can just watch. I have negative 1/2 and negative 3/4. I need to have a common denominator. So they can both go into 4. So that means this one didn't change at all. For this one, I have to multiply my old denominator by 2 to get 4. So I have to multiply the numerator by 2, which is 2. Now I am comparing these two fractions. So remember, the bigger it looks, the smaller it is. So this number actually is smaller, so it's actually going to be bigger. So this would be the bigger fraction. And that was originally this one, so we're going to have it open this way. Okay, I'm going to try another one. They have the same whole number, because this is another trick. If they have different whole numbers, you can literally just look at the whole numbers, and that will save you a lot of time. These have the same whole numbers, so now we look at the denominators. These actually have the same exact denominator, so we don't have to have a common denominator, so we're just going to compare the numerators. So since one looks smaller, it's actually bigger. So it would open this way, because they're both negative. The smaller it looks, the bigger it is. So you guys tried these two. Now, for this one, they already have the same denominator, so you're just comparing the numerators. For these two, they actually have different whole numbers, so you don't even have to really look at anything but the whole numbers and compare them that way. So try those ones. I'm going to try this one with you. So negative 3.08 negative 3.8, add a 0, pretend the decimal's not there. So I'm pretending that this is negative 308 and negative 380. So the smaller it looks, the bigger it is. So that would be the bigger fraction. So it opened towards this one. So the amount of digits it has does not matter at all because you're adding zeros so that they have the same amount of digits. And then whichever one looks smaller is bigger. This one, you have a positive number and a negative number. So positives are always bigger than negatives. So that's automatically the bigger one just because it's a positive number. Okay, now we are going to be comparing more than one thing. So they want us to compare these different temperatures. So I have negative 3 1/10, negative 5/8, negative 2 1/5. They want us to order this from least to greatest. So first thing I'm going to notice is that these have whole numbers. This does not. So I don't even have to worry about common denominators. The one that looks the smallest is the biggest. If this does not have a whole number, pretend there's a 0. So this looks like the smallest, so it would actually be the biggest. Followed by this looks like the next smallest, so that would actually be the next biggest, because with a negative, it's the opposite. And then this would be actually the smallest one. So the smaller it looks, the bigger it is. I'm going to have you try this one. Now this one, they all have the same whole number, so that's not going to help. So you need to come up with a common denominator. I would use 16 because they can all go into 16. So this one's not going to change. See if you could change the numerators for these ones and then order at least to greatest, keeping in mind the bigger it looks, the smaller it is. So that'll be your last one.